Good morning. I've just got to say, as a representative of the US and the US PropTech scene, it is absolutely spectacular to be here and see people from so many different countries, so many different businesses, all gathered in one place. It's unbelievable watching the world link up around PropTech. So what I'm here to tell you about today, we're going to try to tell you about today, is a giant theme that I think is emerging, and I think that may help you organize some of your thoughts for the day as we look at all of these property technologies. So let's start with this. If I'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. There's a famous quote attributed to Henry Ford. I did some research. It turns out he probably never said it, but doesn't matter. The point is this, and I think this is the point that we need to think about as we start looking at the future. We have lived in a world, and our parents have lived in a world, and our grandparents have lived in a world, and some of our great-grandparents have lived in a world defined by the automobile. It is the dominant form of transportation for moving both people and goods in various forms around our cities, between our cities, and it has fundamentally shaped every single thing about real estate. The greatest real estate boom in history was the automobile, right? Cars made suburbs possible. Cars made cities as we know them possible. Trucks, still the automobile, supplied them. And so we've been living in this world completely defined by the car. So how do we start thinking outside of the box of the car? Now, when Henry Ford said this, you have to remember, people had always been using horses. They've been using them, well, for a very, very, very long time. And so even today, anybody know when we talk about how much power a car has, what word do we use? Horsepower, right? It's still in our language today, this relic of this former mode of transportation. But over time, what we saw was you started in a world where you just had horses, then they briefly and uncomfortably coexisted with the coming cars. I'm looking at you scooters right now, right, which are having a hard time as different modes of transportation mesh. But then over time, the car began to define our entire world. And we can see the infrastructure and everything that was built around that. So how do we unlock our mind? So when we think about autonomous vehicles, which is where we're headed here today, I probably should have led with that. And I will apologize. I'm enormously jet lagged, so if I conk out in the middle of this, you'll have to excuse me. But how do we unbox our mind? Now, when I say autonomous vehicles, what most people often think about is driverless cars, right? Driverless cars. And that is our minds constrained with all of our life experience, keeping us in an intellectual box. So what we're going to try to do today is get out of that box a little bit. And hopefully, by the way, find out that the world is not quite as dystopian as some of the worst-case scenarios we saw earlier today. So we're going to talk about three things. A couple of them are going to be familiar. One of them is going to be a little on the edge. And we're going to talk about their impacts on real estate. We're going to talk about radical mobility, which, given by the number of smartphones I see here today, we've all embraced. We're going to talk about the as-a-service economy, which is actually blowing up all around us, redefining business models in transportation and beyond. And then we're going to get to autonomous vehicles, and then I'm going to start making some predictions to try to help us think about this. So let's first look at radical mobility. And this is a change that has come upon us so quickly and with such depth into every aspect of our lives that it almost seems silly for me to stand here and talk about it, right? The fact that now we have in our hands supercomputers studded with sensors that give us access to every piece of information in the world. My predecessors on stage talked about Harvard. I was fortunate enough to go to Harvard, and I remember standing there in 1991, yeah, I'm that old, as a freshman standing in front of Widener Library, which at that time was the second largest repository of books in the world. And I thought to myself, oh my God, I am so lucky. I am one of 1,500 new students this year who gets access, even though it's difficult and it's buried in stacks and you have to go through cards, to this giant repository of knowledge. And in the last 5 to 10 years, almost every single person on Earth has access for free or for almost zero incremental cost to vastly more information than I had to then. So for every downside of the machines, remember that things are being democratized and people are getting access to things that they never did. So there's a real upside there. What it also means is that we've come unstuffed. I feel like this maybe means something different in British slang, but I'm not sure. I hope not. But when I say unstuffed, I mean the number of things that we have has started to reduce drastically. It used to be we had to have a desk where all of our stuff was. We had file cabinets with papers in it. We had fax machines, typewriters. We had shelves to hold our CDs. We had DVDs. We had specialty equipment for playing each one of those things. I mean, just all this stuff, right? Now, we walk around here, most of us came today, maybe you brought a backpack with a water bottle or something, but other than that, all you really needed was your phone, right? So all that stuff is gone. And now, what does that mean? It's created a world where this happens. Look at this woman, and can anybody tell me what she's doing and where she's doing it? Of course you can't, because that could be an office, that could be a hotel room, that could be her own home, that could be a lobby in an airport. It could be almost any place in the world. And what could she be doing? She could be talking to her mother. She could be creating the next great piece of work of art. She could be watching a movie. She could be reading a book. She could be doing work. It's impossible to tell because space and things have become fungible. And that's already led to one great revolution in work, right? And we're all experiencing that. And I'm not even talking about the business models of like our sponsors, Notel or WeWork. I'm talking about the way in which people work, which has been disrupted for years now. So that takes us to the as-a-service economy. We're going to talk briefly about this. Rachel Botsman, a great thinker, she always said, in the American household, I'm not sure about over here, but in the American household, almost everybody has a power drill. The average cost of that power drill, $40 to $50. The average utilization of that power drill, 14 minutes a year, and I think 10 minutes of that putting holes in the wrong place and getting yelled at. Right? So let's reimagine demand and say, I'm not looking for the thing, I'm looking for the outcome. I don't need a drill, I need a hole in the wall. And that's led to an explosion of new business models. Right? Everything from I don't need a CD, I want access to every piece of music ever made. I don't need a DVD player. I want to watch any movie anywhere in the world, anytime I want. This led to the disruption of companies like WeWork and Notel, who are saying, because we have become unstuffed, now we can have on-demand any workspace. And there's a whole stack of technologies that have enabled this, from frictionless payments, security, mobility, high-speed data networks, GPS, then this goes on and on. But it's all this sort of same stack that's creating many of the trends around us, including IoT and everything else. Now in transportation, the as-a-service economy has actually been around for a long time, since the first guy set off in a sailboat with somebody else's olive oil across the Mediterranean to do a trade route. That is transportation as a service. We have our legacy carriers, airlines, FedEx, the shipping companies. But what all of these have had in common throughout time is that they've been either moving a lot of stuff, or moving it a long way, or often moving a lot of stuff a long way. And therefore, the frictional costs we're willing to bear for the efficiency of sharing that transportation is a lot, right? Unless, I don't know anybody in here, who in here owns their own airplane? Okay, good. Well, for the rest of us, we are willing to go, pay the ticket, schedule our time in advance, stand in line at the airport, wait a long time, all because the value of all that friction pales in comparison to the cost of buying the airplane. But what the mobility revolution and the as-a-service revolution, the modern one, has enabled is a whole new set of services. Uber Eats can deliver you food anywhere at any time. Say if you're jet-lagged in London at 1 in the morning and you want a donor. Last night, thank you very much. We have scooters, right, that allow us to just pick up, or shared bikes that allow us to pick up, go, pay, everything is frictionless. You have all sorts of other services that would not have been possible beforehand because the frictional cost of sharing them would have been too much, but now the frictional cost is low, and it's done things amazing. Like, does anybody know what is the technology that powers most of the scooters, the shared scooters in the world? It's Segway. Segway, the company that was a joke of the tech world many years ago, 20 years ago. And all of a sudden, that technology, combined with this whole other stack of technologies, has created an entirely new business model that's sweeping the world. Who here is an Amazon Prime subscriber? Raise your hand, please. Okay, every one of you already subscribes to an all-you-can-eat transportation as a service business. Because what Amazon Prime does is it moves anything you want from somewhere in the world to your house or to your place of work for zero incremental cost. All of this, again, possible by the entire infrastructure network. Okay, I'm going to speed through this because I want to make sure we get to the good stuff. So we're not talking about, now let's talk about driverless cars. And we talk about driverless cars, I don't want us to use those words. Let's just take that out of our minds. Instead, let's use the words autonomous robots. When we start thinking about autonomous robots, they can take any shape or form. They can be highly specialized to do certain things, whether it's to, like the Amazon Prime little doohickey there that's going to move pizza and groceries within cities, whether it's the Roomba, whose job it is to transport dust as a service from one side of your apartment to the other side, right? Whether it's R2-D2, who is in the process, who disrupted Jedis because he started carrying their lightsabers, right? The R2-D2 is a lightsaber-carrying transportation as a service robot. Okay, and I want us to just think about that construct. This can come in any form, and it can be used for all sorts of things, and they can be highly specialized. Now, a key point that I want to get to is the fact that they are multimodal. So for instance, when I went to the airport to fly over here, I took an Uber car. I got to the airport, they put my bag on a conveyor belt, another form of transportation. I got on an airplane and flew, another form of transportation, another conveyor belt back here, another car, and eventually me dragging my bag down the street because I wasn't quite sure where I was because London confused the hell out of me. But that is multimodal. Different specialized modes of transportation linked together to create an outcome that is far better than any single one. So when we talk about autonomy, many people are focused on driverless cars and what they call level 5, which means a car that can operate anytime, under any conditions, in any place, anywhere. But that's not what really matters. What matters is level 4 autonomy, specialized functionality, specialized autonomy that can do certain tasks in certain places. Because once you have that, you can then create a whole bunch of those, link them together, and create a multimodal autonomous network, and therefore transportation as a service through that. Now, this is a tech conference, so I'm going to skip through this one fairly fast. Who does that look like? No, anyways. But people love their cars, everybody says. I live in Texas right now. People love their trucks, also their guns, but their trucks, right? But the fact of the matter is, autonomous transportation is safer. We have, in the US, 40,000 deaths a year, 2.2 million auto injuries a year, globally 2.5 million auto fatalities a year, and this is a staggering fact. When you get to the cheaper, before we talk about the actual more efficient use of capital, roughly 2% of GDP in every developed country in the world goes to automobile accidents, to the physical, medical, insurance, et cetera, costs of automobile accidents. 2% of global GDP, a staggering number. The total cost of ownership for owning a car, and again, I'm going to use the United States because it's what I know, it's about $1,000 a month. It's very expensive. That's about a quarter of people's take-home pay, of the average median take-home pay. And it's also just better. 30% of the vehicles on the street in any city, anywhere in the world, are looking for parking. Who remembers the first time they got out of an Uber and without having to pay, they just walked like a boss right out of the car, right? You remember that? It was a killer feeling, right? Because you felt like a billionaire. Who wants to be a billionaire? Everybody wants to live like a billionaire, and that's what this is going to afford us. And so when we think about this stuff, we need to just keep all of these things in mind. So I just want to make sure I've hit these key points before I move on to my prediction. This is my what the hell did I miss slide. So we're going to have integration of multimodal logistics networks. And when I say multimodal logistics networks, it means it's not just moving people, it's not just moving you to the stuff, it's moving the stuff to you. So I used to live in New York. New York lives in the future because of its hyperdensity. I was so excited because I had a car. I could go to Target or Tesco or whatever you have here, and I could go and I could buy all this stuff and drive it home. And you know what? Because I have an Amazon Prime subscription, I haven't been to that store in 2 years because all of that stuff comes to me. So moving stuff and moving people creates massive efficiency. Transportation will be consumed as a service. I believe this deeply in my heart, so just take that as on faith. Or you can say it's because it's safer, cheaper, easier, better, and more capital efficient. I should say the future of transportation is electric. Fun fact, the average drivetrain of an internal combustion engine has over 1,000 moving parts. The internal drivetrain of an electric vehicle has 18. What does that mean? It means not only you can use electricity instead of fuel, it means that that car doesn't break as often, not nearly as often, far less to be serviced, far less to be maintained, et cetera. And I just want to drive this point home because I know that many of the global property firms, of which many of them are my friends and I respect them very much, but they've been telling people autonomy is not within the investable horizon of real estate right now. Right? I heard, I won't say the name, but it's a colleague of mine who I respect deeply, gave a speech the other day where he said, you shouldn't be investing in flat parking garages that can be repurposed. You should still be investing in ramp parking lots because it's 10 years in the future. It is not. There's been more than $120 billion of reported capital invested in autonomy just in the last few years, and the pace of change and investment is picking up rapidly. It's because level 5 may be 10 years away, but level 4 is here today, and it's about to be scaled, and it is definitely in the investable future. I'm putting my money where my mouth is. I'm starting a company focused on real estate that's investing into our autonomous future. So, let's just talk briefly about the financial drivers of this. Here are the fundamental facts of autonomy. The capital costs are high. Right now, they're very high because this is new technology. They will get cheaper, but they will always still be high. Just like, by the way, the capital cost of a car is high, even if you're financing it. But here's what's low. Your depreciation cycle is really long because it's electric, and it doesn't break down very often, so it lasts a really, 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 really long time. The incremental costs are low because you're using fuel. Yes, you're using electric fuel, but the human labor portion of that has gone away. As you probably know, more than 50% of the cost of your Uber or taxi goes to the driver. It's still not enough in many cases, but all of that is going to drop to near zero. And then the frictional costs, as we've already seen, we talked about getting out like a boss from your Uber, those are also very low. So all of these things are very low. The one thing that's high is capital costs, and when it comes to real estate and investable horizons, this is a really important factor because it's going to drive what I think are the patterns that we're going to see. So to take one moment of dystopia, I know we've had a little bit already today. There are a lot of arguments about whether we are going to wind up in a world where there are not enough jobs, whether automation is going to permanently take away jobs, whether UBI, universal basic income, is going to be a thing. There's arguments pro and con, it's philosophy. I don't know. It hasn't happened yet, but it could happen now. But here's what is for certain, which is we're about to enter an era of significant economic displacement. And no matter what the end state is, the interim state is going to be difficult because people will need to find new jobs, be retrained for new jobs, and there is going to be economic and political disruption as a result of that. I agree with my PwC friends on that completely. So now I'm going to put on my Nostradamus hat, get to a little predicting, and hopefully you'll take some of these thoughts in as you look at see the other sessions today, and they can help you think about how these new technologies and these new ways of doing business are going to impact real estate itself. So the first is that the city is a network. And I like to think of this as the city becoming essentially like a digital network, where everything is packetized in various forms, and it's moved across, and you have multimodal logistics that deliver just in time the right people and the right things to the right places in a highly efficient manner. Cities are going to find new forms, going to need to find new ways to monetize their physical infrastructure, their network. And so when our PwC friends said local is the new global. Cities are where it's at because cities own the networks that move the stuff, and they're going to have tremendous power, and the cities that are forward-thinking and embracing how this happens are the ones that are going to thrive and succeed. Buildings are the Google. It's a big statement, but here's what I mean. We all know this. A lot of information is being aggregated around place, and that information is going to both explode geometrically, not only because of the sensors in the building and the sensors in our pockets, but because buildings are suddenly going to have all of the stuff moving in and out of them, the people moving in and out of them, and all of the data clouds around them are all going to be aggregated. So just like Google, Facebook, became the hubs of our activity in the digital world. Assets are going to become the hubs of the information activity and aggregation in the physical world. And so investing in data collection and data analytics is unbelievably important because even if it is not valuable today, it will be very soon in the future. And for real estate, it's going to create entirely new revenue streams. Service over stuff. This sort of gets back to the drill point. I looked up on Google a picture of a handyman with a drill to talk about how service beats stuff, but it turns out that when you put handyman and drill into Google, you get some very strange results on the pictures. So I don't have a picture of that up here. But the idea is that as capital equipment, drills, are be able to move with transportation and people to help you provide the service, that means you're going to have stuff be able to come to you, and service is going to become more important. It's also going to become more important just as it has in the workplace, whether it's in the hotels or the industriouses or the WeWorks, where having that service experience is more important than having the stuff that you used to rely on. Infrastructure rules. The fists of fury of the future. Data, power. Data and power. So if I'm investing in assets, I'm looking for assets that both have really great data pipes and power pipes run to them, and then the ability to distribute with them within the buildings. That's going to create tremendous amounts of value. This is one of my favorites that I like to think about all the time. Access beats storage. Access beats storage. It's not as important to be able to have a parking lot full of cars. It's important to be able to have cars get in and out quickly. Right? It may not be as important to have 50 rolls of toilet paper stacked in your closet if you can have it delivered to you. It has to be really fast for toilet paper, but yeah, right? But you can have it delivered to you because there's really, really good access. So this is, I think, a giant theme. The picture of the airport you'll see up there, that's actually Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, where I live, which I don't know how they projected this, but they built an airport, if you can see from the loops. This is an airport that's built for access. It means it's very easy to get in and out of, very different from many other legacy airports where you find that the advent of ride sharing has created traffic jams and it's a nightmare, right? So access beats storage. Think about this when you're building buildings. Think about this when you're doing value add strategies in buildings. Think about this when you're thinking about operational strategies for your buildings. How do you improve access? And how do you take the space that was allocated for storage and turn it into a service mechanism? Part of this is because buildings are the next frontier of logistics. And I call this street to suite. Street to suite, right? So that is that we've always been talking about last mile, we're now talking about last leg. How do you get from the curb to the person in the building? Right now, if I order a pizza, for instance, it takes me 30 seconds to order that pizza. It takes them 8 minutes to cook it. It takes 5 minutes for the delivery person to get in and out of the pizza place to get the stuff. They may only take them 2 minutes to get to me, but then it takes them 10 minutes to get lost, find parking, get through my security, get up my elevator, get down my hall, all the way back, which means that as the external logistics networks become more efficient, people are going to be looking for efficiencies inside of buildings, and buildings will become logistical assets. So hotels built with a really good back of house, really good for distributing services throughout buildings. Other assets, not so much. Going to be very interesting. And a lot of this is going to be automated with autonomy, I think. So first, I think what we're going to see is services, human beings. We're seeing this with a lot of the workplace experience apps and tenant experience apps that are providing a human bridge between those two logistics. But over time, that's going to get automated. I think it's an incredibly important space. So this is the big question. My name is Elie, in case you're wondering. That's not the question. The big question is this: are cities going to sprawl? Is it going to get farther out? Are people going to get further away from each other? Or are they going to get closer together? You can see my answer here. Now, part of this, I think, is what our PwC folks talked about, which is people want to be together. The greatest human invention of all is the city, because more innovation comes from cities and interactions, putting people together than anywhere else. But there's another reason. And this gets back to that dollars and cents slide about the fundamental economics of autonomous services, which is they're capital intensive. Capital intensive, and that goes everything, not just from the cars and the robots, but to the installation of 5G networks, high-speed cabling, everything else. And that means people are going to put the capital right now where the people are, right, where there's density. High density is going to drive capital investment, therefore there's high utilization, so people get a good ROI on their investments, right? That in turn is going to create better living, better, cheaper living. All of a sudden, that $10,000 a year you spend on your car, gone. The ability to get stuff delivered to your home, there. So it's going to make the cities more livable, not only for the possibility to interact and be social and not just be shut away in our homes looking at our screens, but also because it's going to make life cheaper, safer, easier, and better. That's going to drive more people, it's going to drive more capital investment, and on the wheel goes. So I don't know what's going to happen in 100 years. That is outside the investable horizon for real estate. But I'm pretty sure about what's going to happen over the next 10 to 30 years, or 5 to 30 years, and that is bet on density. Bet on density. So I'm going to leave you with a quote from, again, Benedict Evans. He's a venture capitalist at Andreessen Horowitz. You may have heard of them. The guy invented the internet, or the web. Also, some of the most thoughtful investors in the world. And he said, autonomous cars will create more billionaires in real estate and in retail than in tech or manufacturing, just like cars did. So look around. You want to know who's going to be winning in the future? It's going to be people who are going to be focused on this massive change and figuring out how to position their assets and their operations to create profits from it and arbitrage what's happening right now, which is the change from the past and into the future. Thank you very much.